Hello and welcome to the Game Theory Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Vicini. We are presented by CLNS Media. Today on the show, we've got good friend of the program and fellow CLNS member, Jared Weiss, to come on, and we're going to talk about all of the Christmas Day basketball games. It's going to be released on Christmas Eve. I think we're recording on February 21st. So little bit of a lag here, but I wanted to get Jared on to talk about these games. He said Thursday worked better than Friday, and because I am the worst shopper in the history of Christmas, I've done like none of my Christmas shopping. The only thing I've gotten is a gift for my girlfriend, and like no one else in my family has gotten anything yet. Jared, how do you handle Christmas shopping?
Well, first off, we're taping on December 21st. I think you said February 21st there, so
oh boy,
that's a
good sign.
I just want to clarify that we're not time traveling on this episode, but let's not rule out anything in the future. And good then, for gifts, I'm just an Amazon guy. Especially living in Boston, you have Prime Now, and you can just get a lot of stuff shipped like within an hour or two to your door. So I'm usually as lazy as it gets, and then I'll just like stop at like a local like mall and just pick up a bunch of stuff at the last second. The Nike outlet, if you live in Boston, the one in Assembly Row in Somerville is like the best store in the world. I got like Flyknit Zooms for like $40. They were like 80% off. I mean, the deals there are insane. So I usually just hit up the Nike store like whenever they have their crazy sales, and that's where I get most of my gifts.
Yeah, but I'm assuming you're shopping for yourself whenever you get Flyknit Zooms for like $40 than for your family, right?
Yeah, they get the $30 ones.
Oh, man. Yeah, no, Amazon is a clutch thing just because, you know, as I think most listeners know, I'm from Pittsburgh originally. Most of my family still lives in Pittsburgh. I obviously am out here in the middle of Hollywood, California. So I hit Amazon real hard, which means like I do have Prime. I can send it out in 2 days. So like I have I would say today and tomorrow to get all my shopping done. So it's going to be a fun day. But Jared, we're going to talk about these Christmas Day games, and that's why I have you on. There are 5 games on Christmas Day: 76ers-Knicks, Cavs, Warriors, Wizards-Celtics. The 4th one is going to be Rockets, Thunder, and the 5th is Timberwolves, Lakers. We're going to go in order of these games, just, you know, from 9 on down until they end at, 10 o'clock Pacific time. So, Jared, before we get into that, though, is there a game that you're most excited for on this calendar? I think that one obviously sticks out, but is there one that you're most looking forward to?
Yeah, I mean, we don't need to bother with Cavs Warriors. Obviously, that's the best matchup in basketball. But Rockets Thunder is the one that's so intriguing because you have Houston, who is arguably the best team in the NBA right now, going up against the Thunder, who, like, if they look like crap in this game, then I think the tone of their narrative takes a really dark turn. Depends how it goes, obviously, but you know, when they won that game the other night, where they barely won it, and it was like Westbrook had 38 points and everybody else had under 10 points, that was a pretty daunting sign. And things seem to be getting. I don't know if things are necessarily getting worse as much as that time is moving forward and things aren't really changing, which makes it seem a lot worse. And then this is, you know, the big stage. It's in prime time. Everyone in the country is going to be watching this one. And if it doesn't go well for the Thunder, this could be a major turning point there. And then we're going to have, you know, when will they trade Paul George pieces every single day for the next 2 months and all that stuff. So, I mean, there's a lot from a narrative perspective. There's a ton riding on this one.
Yeah, it's a really interesting kind of deal there, but we'll get to that whenever we get to that game. Before we get there, though, this podcast is going to be sponsored by MyBookie and by by DraftKings, not by SeatGeek. I'll give SeatGeek a quick plug because they've, advertised on the podcast before, but this is by DraftKings and MyBookie. The first game we're going to talk about, 76ers against the Knicks. Weirdly, coming into this game, given the narratives of the two teams this year, you would think, oh yeah, the 76ers are, you know, very clearly better than the Knicks. They're starting to come into their own. And you look at the records right now, the Knicks, 30 games into the season, 16-14, 76ers, 14-16. Where are you on these two teams? Like, I'm just so fascinated by both of them for a myriad reasons, but like the 76ers obviously have all the young pieces, but the Knicks I'm just continually in awe of because of what Kristaps has done and because of how they've gotten so much out of this core that I thought that, I mean, they obviously tore it down, but I never thought that they would be, build up this quickly again to the point where they could even compete for 500.
It's the power of Enes Kanter and his stance against dictatorships and poor offensive systems all over the world. I mean, you got to give him credit. It's funny that it seems like every trade that we thought was a bad trade this offseason turned out to be a good trade because what do we know in the public, right? But it's been really fun watching him be like really valuable again. Because he's one of those guys that we kind of unfairly packed away as he's really skilled offensively, but because of his limitations, he's not a plus player at the end of the day for the most part. I think is how a lot of the more analytics focused community has looked at it, and how I felt too. And to watch guys like him and Greg Monroe while he was impactful in Milwaukee, to see those guys find a situation where they're more needed and their flaws are less important than the fact that they just are able to carry the team. That's so enjoyable because I hate. Enes Kanter is a really, really skilled offensive player, and he's really enjoyable. And even if his game might be considered a little outdated for the way that the game is played now, it doesn't mean it's not valuable. It doesn't mean it's not enjoyable to watch. And I really like seeing him succeed, seeing him being happy, especially because of all the BS he's had to deal with for just like his personal life and getting traded and all that kind of stuff. He's a guy that, while he may be controversial, he's someone that I really like and I think is a really fascinating and I like him a lot personally. So it's been really enjoyable to see him succeed and see him be in a leadership position. And to see guys like Kyle O'Quinn being really valuable, watching Michael Beasley somehow resurrecting his career for like the 10th time. And then, of course, you get to Kristaps, and it's like it shows that the environment that you're in when you're a young player probably will probably define the way people see you more than your actual capability. Because Kristaps, a lot of people were worried that he wasn't going to be nearly as great as we expected him to be early on just because of the way things went last year, with all the turmoil they had and the managerial issues and the absolutely insane idea that he was ever available for trade. And to see him not only turn it around this year, but he's a legitimate MVP candidate. And I hope that really picks up steam. But he's been unbelievable this year.
Well, yeah, like I talked to like people in other organizations when they, other organizations called about Kristaps whenever the whole shit went down last summer with Phil Jackson, right? And they came away thinking like, there's no way they're trading him. Like they're asking for everything on top of everything else. Like there's no circumstance any team is ever going to meet their insane demands for what they want for Porzingis. So why are you trashing him publicly? Like why are you saying he's available in a trade if he's really not available? All it's going to do is piss him off and put him in a really bad spot mentally. It was the weirdest thing that I think I've ever really come across, and it was the dumbest thing I think I've come across over the course of the last year in the NBA, and I think that's saying a lot. Like the NBA has done some really dumb stuff throughout the course of the last year. Phil Jackson saying that Kristaps Porzingis was available for a trade when realistically he really wasn't is the dumbest thing I think anyone has done this past year. Let's go on ahead though and talk about the Knicks because they are just very interesting in the way that they're constructed. And I agree with you on Kanter. Kanter is, for me, he's certainly overpaid, but because of that overpayment, he's undervalued publicly in a pretty significant way. For years I'd been talking about trying to get a big offensive rebounder next to Kristaps, like a guy who can play both the 4 and the 5 preferably, but can go in, crash the glass, and hopefully allow the Knicks to retain some semblance of a transition defense. My guy personally, like in terms of the perfect fit, was always Tristan Thompson. I love the idea of Tristan Thompson next to him. He can defend multiple positions. He can crash the offensive glass. He's a perfect fit because they can still get enough offense because of Kristaps. But Kanter, while he's not going to do the defensive stuff that Tristan Thompson does, he crashes the offensive glass. He is a legitimate post threat. He can stretch it out and shoot threes occasionally. He's, not the world's best shooter, but he's at least useful there. He's kind of the perfect fit on offense for what Kristaps is going to do, stretching the floor and creating his own jump shot now, given the fact that Kristaps is just apparently God now who can do whatever he wants whenever he gets in the mid post.
Apparently. I don't know if there's much question there anymore. And you know what? The Knicks have their offensive rebound percentage, 29.6, tied for first in the NBA.
Yep.
So it's pretty much a match made in heaven. And you nailed it. And it takes the responsibility off of Kristaps to have to impact the rim and allows him to basically tear everybody up from the perimeter and then attack when he needs to. And we're seeing now that his handle's gotten good enough now, kind of like where Giannis was 2 years ago, where like his handle's finally gotten good enough now that just once he basically has like a little bit of an angle, that first step is so long that he gets by you, and then the play is pretty much over at that point because he comes in with so much momentum and he's so high up that he's always drawing a foul once he gets into the paint, or he's able to get the shot up over the defender. So having Kanter down there, who is basically just like, when he doesn't have the ball, he's basically just like throwing his butt into someone and trying to move them out from underneath the rim. So I remember watching a game where I can't remember if they actually beat the Celtics or not, but I remember it was a close one. Sorry, I can't remember off the top of my head, but I remember every single play was basically Kanter would get in there at the last second. It would be him and usually Aaron Baines just wrestling like a bunch of Australians trying to fight underneath the rim, and they really use that to their advantage, where they'd get they'd basically create a little no man's land between wherever Porzingis was getting to the paint area with the ball and wherever Kanter was, usually forcing Baines or whomever is underneath there to choose between the two. And I think Kanter ended up getting a lot of either assisted baskets or just offensive rebounds, just because because Kristaps was blowing by a lot of the times another big. There's usually only one big underneath to deal with two players at the same time who both have great hands and can get off a shot at any angle. And New York has done such a good job of taking advantage of that, and that's something that we don't see really a lot in the NBA anymore. It's something that we saw a lot really 10 years ago, and it's kind of disappeared. So it's been a nice little throwback to watch them execute those actions a lot.
Yeah, the Knicks do kind of strike me as a throwback team in a lot of ways. So I'm going to be interested to see kind of where their season goes. Does it continue to go as well as it has thus far, or does it eventually kind of fall off a little bit? Let's talk about the 76ers. They are in a bit of a struggling phase right now. They've lost 7 of 8 games, and I believe that their only win over the course of that time was an overtime game against Minnesota that got everyone excited because, Joel Embiid kind of dominated Karl Anthony Towns and beasted him a little bit. But this is still a team that has lost 7 of 8 games. They're going to be coming into this game on a run that isn't necessarily all that exciting. It seems unclear at this stage if Joel Embiid is going to play on Christmas Day. He certainly has missed the last few games just kind of due to minute workload, and he has, I guess, a bit of a wonky back right now. But following the 7 losses in 8 game stretch, are you still as enthused about the 76ers as you were before? Like, did you kind of figure eventually there would be some adversity and this was going to come along? Or has this kind of recalibrated a little bit where you are with where this organization is in its development phase?
It's not that much of a surprise. I mean, Embiid was out for 3 of those losses there, which, if they ever win without Embiid in there, that's usually like a pretty big win there. And the last loss was that amazing game against OKC where he played 48 minutes. So the fact that he had to play 48 minutes, I think, was pretty horrifying for everybody watching that one. But his minutes have been going up lately. They've been really relying on him, and that definitely is a little bit of a red flag because they have to keep that under control. And that means that Simmons, who's going to have lapses because he's a rookie technically, and because he doesn't have much of a shot, when he's going to go up against defenses that are able to basically prevent him from getting inside the free throw line, that's going to really hurt their offense, and that's when they really count on Embiid to bail them out from the high post. So I think that this is what you expect to see when they have, their schedule's been pretty hectic lately, and they've been facing some good teams. Chicago ended up being a tough matchup for them, which nobody really expected, but Chicago's been on fire. So they've been facing a lot of really good teams in the last couple of weeks there. So I'm not necessarily worried about it, and almost all of the losses have been at least the last, I think, 6 games have all been under 10 points. So they're not getting blown out. They're competitive. And I think that's probably a better litmus test to whether or not this is a major red flag are they just completely shutting down when Embiid is out there? It doesn't look like that's the case.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. The way that teams have gone about defending Ben Simmons is really interesting to me. It seems like I don't even like they figured out a way to do it. Like, and it seems like they're playing a bit more aggressively in the way they defend him. Whereas early in the season, they would go under screens basically all the time, and he just beat them to the spot because he has such long strides and such a quick first step that he was able to get there and just kind of get wherever he wanted when you went under the screen. But now they're starting to defend him a little bit more aggressively, and he doesn't really, he hasn't like quite calibrated. His numbers haven't been worse by any stretch, but there does seem to just be a little bit something off. The number that has jumped is the turnovers. I think he's averaging like 5 turnovers over his last 10 games just because it seems like, you know, he hasn't quite figured out how to deal with the increased defensive pressure yet that teams are kind of placing in his face.
Yeah, and Philly's dead last in turnover rate. They're at 17.6, so that's been one of their biggest issues. And I guess that's always going to be an issue with when you're not really a veteran team, especially for them. Even though they've added veterans, none of them are ball handlers. All their ball handlers are young guys who, T.J. McConnell, who is still better than Michael Jordan, sure, but he commits a lot of turnovers. He misses a lot of he doesn't take the right shots a lot of the time. He tries to make a great play too often. And the hardest thing you have to learn about being a good point guard in the NBA is when to be aggressive and when to not be aggressive. And I didn't sound intelligent there. I'm trying to think of the opposite word, but the point being is that
passive.
There we go. Thank you. It's so ironic that or coincidental. The word is passive. You have to know when to pass and when to be passive. And they're all learning that at the same time. And it's funny because they've always had this generally not having a veteran point guard on the roster to kind of help everybody learn that. And I think that if there was ever an area where they needed to really have veteran help, it was going to be as a backup big, which they've been doing, and then also having a backup point guard who could just teach McConnell and Simmons how to be careful, how to just know when you have to take the initiative yourself or just kind of reset out of a play. And they just have too many times where they just drive into the lane and they kind of panic and they turn the ball over and stuff like that. And Embiid obviously turns the ball over, and that contributes a lot to it. And that's something that I think once they kind of work out of their system over the next year, assuming that they do, which I think they will, that's going to take them from a team that currently is, I think, still a negative differential. I think they're minus 0.4.
They're exactly even per the NBA right now. It's funny. Both the Knicks and the Sixers are exactly even in terms of net rating this year. So it's kind of a funny game.
And they have inverse records at 16 and 14 and 14-16, which is great. So, which we'll look at the differential more than we'll look at the record, I guess, at this point. But yeah, I think they're gonna, once they cut down on the turnovers, they have less wasted possessions, and as these guys continue to become better shooters, which happens pretty rapidly over the early stage of the development, I think it's going to turn around pretty quickly over the next year. So I'm not concerned long term. I'm more concerned about whether they can still be a plus 500 team this year. But if they're still 14 and 16 and Embiid has missed 4 games in the last month, then I'm not really that worried.
Let's talk Cavs Warriors. The Cavs are coming in really hot, obviously. They're 23-9 now. The Warriors 25-6. Have the Cavs, I talked about the Rockets on my last podcast. I think the Rockets have been the best or second best team in the NBA behind the Warriors, but have the Cavs entered that kind of top tier at this stage? Like after the early season struggles and the early season worries, I was someone who thought, maybe go 15 more games and then see what you can do at the end of it. I believe that we talked about that on the last podcast we did together. Just kind of hold the course, see what happens, but you shouldn't be opposed to making deals if they come about. I mean, since that time, it feels like they've won like 18 of 20 games or something like that. And all of the concerns and all of the worries have gone away. How, do you feel that way? Do you feel like the Cavs have fixed their issues and that with the injection of Isaiah Thomas in the new year that, these things are just going to kind of work themselves out? Or do you feel like this team still needs one extra piece to be able to compete with a team like they're going to go up against on Christmas in the Warriors?
So for one, it's not like 18 and 20. It's literally 18 and 20. You were right on the money there. Which is amazing. And it's been I would erase the concerns from the beginning of the year, except for the fact that LeBron's output continues to be pretty extreme and not sustainable. And I don't care if he drinks tiger blood before every single game and and really internally has the organs of an 8-year-old. I mean, he's almost 33, turns 33 in like a week and a half or so. He's not going to be able to sustain this amount of output throughout the year. And so the question will be whether Isaiah can pick up the slack, who he's going down to the G League today or tomorrow. So by the time this podcast airs, I guess he'll be just about ready to make a season debut, hopefully. So Isaiah, by the time that LeBron needs to go into spring break mode, I'm pretty sure Isaiah will have his feet under him and have the system kind of locked in enough that won't be much of an issue. And then they can, bring LeBron's minutes back down to the low 30s mark. And that will allow this to be sustainable. They have Tristan Thompson back now, and it looks like they're probably going to bring him off the bench for the most part, I believe, right? So,
I'm very interested in the injection of Tristan Thompson into this lineup, just given how awesome their lineups have looked with Channing Frye, right? Like, I don't know that I would want to reduce Channing Frye's minutes. Like, given what we've seen and given the way that, those lineups kind of operate. Obviously, over the course of the last 3 games, they haven't played a ton of Channing Frye minutes whenever they've beaten Washington, Utah, and the Lakers. But those lineups where he's just out there spacing the floor, they just run so incredibly well, especially when you pair him with Kyle Korver. You have 2 elite shooters. You throw LeBron out there. You throw Dwayne Wade out there. Those lineups are basically unguardable with how much creation is on the floor and how much spacing is on the floor.
Yeah, not to mention D. Wade seems to be getting it together as well, so that makes obviously a pretty huge difference. Frye, like these kind of role players, they tend to pop up and look great for a few weeks throughout the year and then kind of fade away again and kind of ebb and flow. So we'll see if that lasts. But I'm glad that they're bringing Tristan off the bench. That's kind of that's a sacrifice they have to kind of force onto him, because it just makes so much more sense for them to do that, especially because they don't have all shooters around them in the starting lineup. They kind of just have to do that. And I think Love has proven that he's capable of doing this now. He's having a phenomenal season.
Yep.
I don't think he's gotten really any credit for what I've seen, but I think he's been phenomenal. And I'm hoping that they'll start to kind of move away from their defensive scheme of always showing hard with him and just ice most of the time or switch most of the time, which if they have Crowder in that lineup and they have Wade in that lineup, they should be able to switch most of the time. So they've got to adapt there, and that's been an issue that they've always had, is just being able to kind of commit to doing that and not blitzing or hard hedging most of the time. But once they start to do that consistently, the offensive issues aren't really... I'm not worried about the offensive fit so much. I'm just mostly worried about them executing their defense. And it looks like that's happening effectively enough now that they should be good to go once Isaiah comes back. But we'll see. I mean, they have Jose Calderon out there now at the point, and I don't think there's much of a difference between him and Isaiah Thomas defensively. So they should be good for the rest of the year with this scheme.
The Jose Calderon thing is one of the funniest things in the NBA to me right now. The fact that he has been relatively useful as he has been for the Cavs so far is amazing to me. I can't get over it. I don't know how this is happening.
I don't understand how a 55-year-old can be this effective in the NBA, but he's a magical human being.
He really is. Kevin Love, you mentioned him. He has been really incredible this year. I agree. You look across the board, the field goal percentage is up. He seems to be rebounding a little bit better. The 3-point percentage is up. He's been a lot stronger inside, it seems like, too. I don't know if last year maybe, he's made that move toward having a much fitter, slimmer body over the course of his career. And I wonder if he went a little bit too far that direction last year. And it seems like this year he looks a little bit more sturdy. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think maybe his core's stronger again or something like that. Or he's just playing with more commitment and they're giving him more freedom to just be assertive underneath the hoop as opposed to worrying about being a perimeter scorer. I mean, Chris Bosh took him a couple years to figure out how to be really effective next to LeBron and Wade, and that's what always happens with this quote-unquote third star that gets put next to LeBron. They want to just turn him into a shooter to let LeBron have room, and then I guess eventually the teams realize we got to let this guy still play to his strengths. And and also I think just this season, a lot of teams are going back to utilizing the post, and they found new ways to utilize the post as most defenses start to switch more and more. So that's just it's allowed Kevin to go back to doing a lot of the stuff that he's always been so great at. And then when he gets to do that, it's the classic thing of guys need to touch the ball, see the ball go through the hoop, and that makes them play harder and harder. He gets to do that more, and that enables him to play harder, and it gives him more energy and motivation.
Yeah, that's a really interesting kind of concept there. Especially, I have noticed that there has been like a bit more of an emphasis on trying to take advantage of post-ups and try to take advantage of switches this year. And, Kevin Love, it's funny that we talk about how he has stretched his game out and started to take more and more shots away from the basket. You look at Synergy, his most common play type this year is actually a post-up. He is posted up on 112 possessions, and he's in the 74th percentile, scoring almost a point per possession right now. So that's a really great example of how they're doing a great job of getting him in mismatched situations that have allowed him to take advantage of what his skill set is, as well as allowing him to play as a pick and pop man, spotting him up in the corner and letting him knock down threes. He can still do all that stuff, but taking advantage of what his natural skill set is, the Cavs are doing a lot better of a job of that this season, particularly in the last, I would say, 20 or so games. Do we need to talk about anything else? I do want to ask you one more thing about the Cavs, though, before we go forward. How do you think Isaiah Thomas gets integrated? Because you know Isaiah so well from your time in Boston, obviously. I think it would be just kind of wrong for me not to ask you this. What do you think the process looks like for getting Isaiah into this offense and getting him rolling with everyone else?
Yeah, it's a really good question because I don't know. So it would make sense to kind of keep him off ball or just use him as a secondary ball handler early on, just so he can get a feel for the offense. And he's one of the best off-ball players in the game. So the question would be then, who are you putting him with? Because I don't think you're going to put him with Calderon or Derrick Rose if Rose is coming back to play anytime soon. So that would be the really interesting question, is what does that lineup look like? I guess if you have LeBron and Wade out there, then you can just mix it up enough that Isaiah doesn't have the responsibility of executing every set. Because I'm really curious to see how well does he know the playbook. He's been there the whole time, so I'm sure he's been learning it. But he hasn't really played he hasn't played that much live action 5-on-5. He's just starting, it seems like, this week probably to play live action 5-on-5. So there's a difference between knowing the playbook in theory and then having experience executing it out there and really having a feel for how guys execute it. Because it's the point guard, it's more about how everyone else executes the play rather than how you execute the play. So your job is mostly to pass it to the guy at the right time and be in position to make that pass. So I would imagine they're gonna probably I think the lineup should be Isaiah, Wade, either Crowder or Smith, LeBron, and Love, and that puts three guys that can handle the ball on the floor. Probably takes enough pressure off of Isaiah while still allowing him to be the guy that brings the ball up and, for the most part, be the point guard. That's the way to integrate it. And then the question is, who do you go with the wings from there on out? Is it, because you got basically four guys that you could use in that lineup besides LeBron, Love, and Isaiah. So they'll be able to mix it up based on matchup, but I think they'll have enough ball handlers on the floor to supplement him as he gets acclimated, but he'll get acclimated quickly. I mean, he's smart, he works his ass off, and I don't think their system is complicated enough for it to be like a major challenge for him. Yeah. So it should be fine. Let's
talk about the Warriors real quick. I find this team just kind of uninteresting right now. Like I know that they're incredible, and I know that they are very clear, far and away favorites to win the title right now. But they're just kind of not interesting in any way to me because they're kind of working their way through the season. They're sleepwalking a lot of games and still winning. It's just not all that informational, I guess, in terms of the way that they operate on a night-to-night basis. Like, I don't think we're learning anything about this team every single time they take the floor that we don't already know about them. Has there been anything in particular that you can point to that stands out, though?
I want to be a good guest here, but honestly, I'm bored with the Warriors at this point. So not at the moment. I mean, I feel like their rotation keeps changing, so that'll be interesting to see how that shakes out at the end of the year. Will the great savior from Israel, Omer Caspi, be a really important role player for them? Is he going to take a lot of what Andre Iguodala does for them? Who's going to be that other big? Bell should be, I assume. So that's been interesting. And JaVale McGee's parking lot chronicles are one of the most important things happening in the NBA right now. So there's that too. But yeah, I mean, come on, like when we have these dynasties, the regular season becomes uninteresting in the third or fourth year, right? I think even last year was only interesting because Kevin Durant was there. But this year, now it's multiple-time champion, pretty much the same core roster. Not much new to learn here. It's when injuries happen, like with Steph, that it becomes a little bit interesting, but they're continuing to be fine without him, and they'll be incredible when he comes back. Hopefully he'll be back for this Christmas Day game, but it sounds like it's not going to happen in time. But it'll just get interesting as the playoffs are approaching, and we're starting to figure out how are they going to recalibrate for the 8 or 9 man rotation. And then once the games really matter in the playoffs, then you can enjoy the shock and awe. But until then, unless Durant gets hurt, I guess this is going to be a pretty straightforward, probably 66 to 68 win regular season for them.
Yeah, like last year, there was the integration of Kevin Durant. This year, it's the integration of Omer Caspi and Jordan Bell. Like, there's a little bit of a difference there in terms of interest, especially when it comes to, general fans trying to figure out, okay, do we have to watch this game? No, not really. We're not going to learn anything new. Fine, whatever. Like, to me, this Warriors team is the epitome of, the casual sports fan who likes college basketball and hates when teams don't play defense and don't try hard in the NBA. Just because it's clear that this team does not really care as much about the regular season as they need to. Like this team, they're still obviously really, really good defensively, and they're still obviously really, really good offensively, and they do what they have to win. But it's not like they're blowing every team out like they're capable of.
Yeah, and it's funny because LeBron is actually having an interesting regular season because his team has been in such dire straits that he's had to play it at an insane level. And, LeBron's been the MVP of the league for 10 years straight now, but we don't give it to him every single time for various reasons, most of which are legitimate. But this year, I think he's a runaway probably this year, although Harden has certainly been insane enough that they're pretty close.
I would give it to LeBron, but I do think that Harden has a case from many people around the league. I think that mostly want to give it to him because of last year when he probably should have won it anyway, now looking back.
I said it was a no-brainer to give it to him last year, and never been in the Westbrook camp, although I respect the hell out of him, never been in the Westbrook camp. And I think that one's going to be looked upon the way that we look on Derrick Rose's MVP from a few years ago. It's that one's not gonna age well.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. Let's talk about Wizards Celtics though, because I think that we're running a little bit long here. Unsurprising with us two involved. Wizards and Celtics I think they were two of the top 4 teams entering the season in the Eastern Conference. The Celtics have ascended to that kind of lofty praise and even surpassed the expectations that were heaped upon them, especially given the Gordon Hayward injury that occurred in Game 1. The Wizards, on the other hand, they're figuring things out, but probably have not necessarily lived up to the expectations that were heaped upon them. I thought they were a sneaky chance to win the Eastern Conference this year, personally, just because they had a lot of chemistry together from being the same core over the course of 3 to 4 years now. The Celtics were integrating new pieces, the Cavs were integrating new pieces, but that's going to be just proven false at this stage. So what have been, before we get to the Celtics, because I've talked about the Celtics a lot on this podcast, including with you, what have you thought of the Wizards this season?
I'm not as down on them or I guess people are just average on them as opposed to down. I'm not at that point yet, just because it's early enough in the year that once Wall gets healthy, they can turn it around. And I think Beal's been great and has really taken the next step in his career to being a truly, clearly all-star caliber player. And he'll be an all-star without question this year. So that's been great. and Markieff, there's something about the Morris twins that they go on trial in the summer, and then they both are hurt for some reason when they come back. I don't know if they weren't working out at all. I mean, I know for a fact that Marcus was doing some workouts while he was out there, so who knows how that happened. But, they've had to deal with those injury issues. I mean, the three great perimeter players that they have in Washington are all playing great, and Porter is evolving, Beal's evolving. I just think the rest of Washington is kind of stale, and their depth isn't that great. I don't like their roster that much. I mean, their whole thing has always been that they had a garbage bench with a really great and potent starting lineup. And, you look at this year and nothing has dramatically changed. I mean, they're not turning the ball over at all. According to Cleaning the Glass, they're 5th in the league in turnover percentage, which is great. And I thought that was kind of an issue for them. They were kind of towards the middle of the pack last year. So they've gotten better there. They're not shooting the ball quite as well. Defensively, they've been really good at just forcing mediocre shots from their opponents, and they're, I think, 7th in the league in defensive rating. So they're pretty balanced. They just don't seem nearly as potent as they did in the last year. But I'm trying to remember, didn't they kind of emerge late last year? And I would kind of expect that to happen again this year. They just kind of seem like a March and April kind of team, really. And so I'm not going to write them off yet. But if Wall comes back and he really looks good, and they're still not consistently beating teams, then that's when it gets to be concerning.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's going to write them off or anything. The comparison between Bradley Beal and Victor Oladipo this year has been very interesting. You look at their numbers across the board; they're very, very close to identical outside of 3-point percentage, and Victor Oladipo's at 43%, Bradley Beal's at 36%. I think you'd be hard-pressed to find anyone that would say Victor Oladipo is a better shooter than Bradley Beal, right?
I would agree with that. Well, for now, I would agree with that. But yeah, he's been amazing this year, so who knows?
Yeah, Oladipo is very clearly a different shooter now. He's a very good shooter now, but Bradley Beal is one of the best shooters in the NBA. 24 points a game for Bradley Beal, 25 for Victor Oladipo. You look at their 3-point rate. They're both taking 3-pointers on 34.5 to 34.8% of their shots. Free throw rate, 28.7 to Beal, 29.5 to Victor Oladipo. Oladipo's certainly been better on the glass. Beal been about the same with Oladipo in terms of assist rate. I would also say Oladipo's a slightly better defender than Bradley Beal. Just, he's probably not as good as he was last year in Oklahoma City this year just because of the increased offensive workload, but he is a pretty good defender when he's kind of rolling here. So it's just a really interesting comparison to see who the starting two guard, or if you're trying to find a starting two guard, I guess realistically you could start 2-point guards, but who is the starting two guard in the Eastern Conference this year, Bradley Beal or Victor Oladipo? You mentioned their starting lineup. I will point out that the Wizards' best lineup, the John Wall, Bradley Beal, Otto Porter, Kelly Oubre, Marcin Gortat lineup, they're a plus 21.8 in net rating right now. That is, I believe, either first or second among starting lineups or top lineups in the NBA. It's either them or the Rockets right now. So I would say that the starters versus bench stuff seems pretty much about right. You know what I mean? That feeling coming into the year has been kind of proven out over the course of the first 30 games here. Having said that, this was a team that was going to be trying to get better bench production this year. They were trying to be a bit more well-rounded. I will say that I've liked what I've seen from Tomas Satoransky. I think he's been pretty solid this year. I'm not a big Markieff Morris guy, just kind of don't really get what the appeal of him is on the floor. He's a guy that kind of stops the ball in a pretty significant way, and I think kind of bogs down everything that you're trying to do. Mike Scott has been way better. That's been an underrated value signing this year for them. Jan Mahinmi has been okay, but at the end of the day, there does just seem to be such a massive difference in their starters to bench, and it's because a lot of the guys that I'm mentioning aren't creators at all. They're guys that are fun role players, solid role players, but just aren't quite as good as they need to be when it comes to creating their own offense. That's what the Wizards really need. It's what they went out and got last year with Bojan Bogdanovic, and I think it helped them a little bit. I wouldn't be surprised to see them try and do a similar thing this offseason or this trade deadline.
Yeah, so I was going to say, like, with Washington, you can't judge them early in the year because they're going to trade a first-round pick for for probably an average rotation player at some point.
It'll be like Lou Williams.
They do it every single year. So, yeah, Lou Williams is an interesting one just because they're always struggling to find point guard help, although I think Tim Frazier is way better than Brandon Jennings was last year. But so,
yeah, Frazier's okay. I'll say that.
Yeah, and he's stepping in and he's starting. I think he's doing an okay job. But and I should be clear while I'm saying that their bench is mediocre, they're good in the playoffs because when they're at an 8 or 9 man rotation and you've got Oubre, Scott, and I guess Markieff or whomever else you want to throw as like the other guy in that rotation, their short rotation is good. And Oubre's awesome, and I've been big on him since day one. Even though I never watched him in college, I was pleasantly surprised to see how solid he was. Actually, I was there in Washington the night that they drafted him, and I remember Ernie Grunfeld came out afterwards, and everyone was like, "Why'd you draft Kelly Oubre?" And he basically just looking at everyone, basically thinking like, "You guys think that we drafted an average player, but he's actually going to be very good." And that was a great pick. I thought they nailed that one.
They did. They absolutely nailed it. As someone who covers the NBA draft, Kelly Oubre throughout the course of the year was considered a likely lottery pick, and they got him at number 15, if I remember correctly. That was an awesome pick for them. And I was someone that I was middling on Oubre. I think I had him at like 12 or 13 on my board that year. I was concerned about the way that, he didn't seem to apply his skills on the floor in the same way that his tools would, kind of bear themselves out to have potential to be. So when that kind of stuff happens, it scares me. But having said that, they have transitioned the tools to talent. And I think that, Kelly deserves quite a bit of credit. I saw him work out this summer with Drew Hanlon. He works his ass off on shooting three-pointers and creating off the bounce and getting out in transition and stuff. So he's really done great work to kind of get where he is now in terms of his game.
And just to dive down the rabbit hole quickly a little more, I think one of the questions or criticisms of the pick at the time was you just drafted Otto Porter, you drafted Bradley Beal right before that, you're drafting another wing, and Washington was one of the teams that was ahead of the ball on this one.
That's a great point.
Every team now is realizing you want to have 3 really good wings because they're probably going to be playing most of your minutes at the same time. And Boston
have 5 good wings.
Yeah, exactly. Boston has been really committed to this. They have like 1,000 wings out there. So Washington has done a really good job at that. And we're seeing now the way that teams go small is they want to have 3 wings. They don't even care if one's like a hybrid big the way that the Morris twins are. And just another quick rabbit hole is the Morris twins are really good bench players, and they happen to start wherever they are. And they care a lot about starting because they're very kind of old school guys. And Marcus does not want to come off the bench. I can tell you that. He's told me that. He's told a lot of people that. He said it publicly a lot. But they're, because of the way that they play, and you nailed it with their kind of ball stoppers, their mid-range scorers, that's really valuable, having them come off the bench and being that second or third offensive option with your second unit. But having it as a starter, I think it kind of throws a wrench in your system. And I think Boston is playing better without having Morris as part of their starting lineup. And I think Washington is probably better off having other Morris not part of their starting lineup and having Oubre out there more. So, we'll see how that plays out. But if they're going with the Wall, Beal, Porter, Oubre, and then another big lineup, that's a team that I think will be probably on even par with all the other top Eastern Conference teams in the playoffs.
I think I agree with you. I am still relatively high on this Wizards team at the end of the day here. Like I think I would take them over Toronto right now, to be honest, to make a run in the Eastern Conference. Before we move on and talk about the Celtics, though, let's get some bills paid here. Holiday cash, you need it. I know where you can get it. MyBookie is the place to score some serious cash on your sports predictions. Believe it or not, the holidays are just around the corner. And while that means plenty of parties, gifts, and spending, it also means there's a lot of football, basketball, and hockey games you can score big on every day. Man up and play like the pros on game day. You can play the money line, side, or total. MyBookie is your hookup for all your betting needs, and they offer fast payouts when you win. Where you bet is just as important as who you're betting on, and if you want to make money betting the games, you've got to go to mybookie.ag. They're the only site I would recommend. I trust them, but you don't have to take my word for it. Check them out yourselves. They have odds on every matchup and a mobile site that makes wagering on your smartphone a breeze. Join now, and MyBookie will match your deposit with up to a 50% bonus. Use promo code GAMETHEORY, GAMETHEORY, to activate that offer. Visit mybookie.ag today. You play, you win, you get paid. Our second sponsor is DraftKings. Listen up, Hoops fans. Basketball season is back, and that means your favorite hardwood heroes have returned to the action. It's time for you to put your fantasy knowledge to the test and earn huge cash prizes every night playing one-day fantasy basketball at DraftKings.com. At DraftKings, there are so many ways to play. Choose from public contests with huge cash prizes to private contests where you can compete against your friends. They've even got beginner and casual contests where you'll play against people of a similar skill level. The best part is you get to draft a new team every day, and the best part of fantasy sports is drafting a new team. The only thing better is winning cash to do it. There are huge cash prizes and bragging rights awaiting only at DraftKings.com. Use the code CLNS at DraftKings to play for free with your first deposit for your share of $10,000 in total prizes tonight. Don't wait. Use the code CLNS to seriously cash in tonight. That's code CLNS only at DraftKings.com. The game inside the game. Whew, Jared, let's go on ahead and talk about the team you cover, the Boston Celtics. I will let you start with where you want to start with the Boston Celtics. I know that is one specific player that is just near and dear to your heart.
So for me, the true hero at the Celtics is Yabusele, as he's known nowadays. It's Yabu, who you don't get to see very much, and then the dancing bear comes out there, buries a three, pulls back an arrow from his invisible quiver, fires off an arrow from his bow into the stands, and then dabs right away. And he did it for the second time in like the last couple of weeks against Miami, and it was glorious, and it changed the world as we know it, and it's literally the only thing that interests me about the Celtics at this point.
I have never understood the Yabusele thing. I was not high on him in the draft.
Okay, so
I was I get the appeal of him as a fun looking player, but I do not understand it.
Okay, so listen, we all know that the Chinese Basketball League is the highest quality of basketball that's out there, right? So when he was out in China, he was showing the capability to be just kind of a catch-and-shoot three-point shooter who could attack off of a closeout and was powerful enough and athletic enough that he could be a difference maker near the rim. And, I called him French Draymond, which everyone killed me for. I don't think he's nearly as good as Draymond Green. In fact, I think maybe he'll be a rotation player in the NBA, but he has the same template of skill set that a player like that has. That's the comparison there. It's just the idea that he can be a multi-tool guy that you can play at the five and run the offense through and he can play make from anywhere on the floor. But he's so raw that it's hard right now to project if he'll be a useful rotation player. I thought coming into the season, I thought he would be at some point this year. It's gone pretty much the way I expected, except he's gotten less time than I thought he would get. He was really lost on defense early on, and I think Stevens realized that he just wasn't going to be able to play him that much because he was so lost on defense. And because of Marcus Morris's injury, and Horford's had to miss a game here or there, Daniel Tice broke his nose, although he hasn't missed any time, amazingly. So they've had to go to Yabusele a few times just because of that, but he hasn't done anything yet to show that he's going to break through the lineup unless he starts really making threes, and that's the one thing that he can do that Baines and Tice cannot do.
Well, the other issue here is they drafted a better version of Yabusele when they drafted Ojale. Ojale is just better than Yabusele at everything, I think. I don't know what
That's true.
I don't know what the skill is that Yabusele has that Ojale doesn't have, except in a more athletic, better frame.
I think the only difference is he's just a little bit taller and bigger, but Ojale has proven that there's not really much limitation to him playing the five. They've started to use him at the five a little bit more with mostly their core starters when they go small with three guards with Rozier Smart and who's that guy? Kyrie Irving. Oh yeah, and then either Jason Tatum or Jaylen Brown. They can go with Ojale at the five, and that's actually been working for them because he just goes vertical with his chest out, and he's such a rock that people can't do anything against him. But unlike Yabu, he can guard almost every position on the floor. I think Yabu eventually will be nimble enough to guard most wings/bigs, but Ojale already can do it, and he has some issues with apprehension with the shot. He's getting a little gun shy, and that's having him become a little bit of a negative in the offense sometimes. But overall, his contribution's been good, and especially for a rookie, it's been really good.
Yeah, I will just say that I will be surprised if Yabusele is competently guarding wings within the next 2 years.
I would agree. I agree with you.
I will be pretty shocked. Let's talk about the real Celtics, though, and get off the 10th and 11th men. Al Horford this year has been just unbelievable. I think that we can't really emphasize enough how incredible he has been on both ends of the floor for the Celtics. One big thing that he's always kind of gotten shit for is the impact on defensive rebounding when he's on the floor. If you actually look, the Celtics have been one of the best defensive rebounding teams in the NBA this year. Horford, in his time on the floor, has not significantly hindered them. They actually have a slightly higher defensive rebounding rate when Horford is on the floor. Obviously, his multifaceted offensive skill game has been incredible for what the Celtics do. He's incredible in handoff situations with Kyrie Irving, incredible in pick and pop, pick and roll situations. Defensively, he can do just all of the little stuff that you hope for from a five in the modern NBA. Can not necessarily switch out onto ones, but he can at least, hedge out and recover against ones in a significant way due to his quickness. So Al Horford, to me, has been just, I would say he's probably been one of the 7 or so most valuable players in the NBA this year.
Yeah, he was, after the first month, he was right at the top for MVP. He was right there because it wasn't really Kyrie at that point. I mean, Horford was the MVP of the team. I think Kyrie is probably taking control at this point as who you identify as the MVP, but he's just been so good. He's been playing, he elevated his game to another level in the playoffs last year, and there's a lot of he was getting shit on by the Boston media, and let's establish the Boston media. There's the beat reporters that actually know what they're talking about, and then there's the people on radio and TV who don't know what they're talking about, and usually will read our articles and then regurgitate it back and then put their own incorrect spin on it. So, and there's some people I like in that area, so I'm not painting that brush over everyone, but that is the Boston media that most people think of when they think of the Boston media. It's all hot takes. It's Lou Merloni, a former Red Sox second baseman who coined the phrase "Average Al" earlier this year on a radio show, and everyone started calling him Average Al, and then after that, Al proceeded to become like the MVP of the team. Horford, because he isn't assertive scoring the ball most of the time, people don't find him effective if they don't really watch the game. And that kind of changed in the playoffs where he became more and more assertive. And then when Isaiah went out, he just went apeshit in the post. And we saw in that opening night when Hayward went down, Horford, especially really in the second half when they came back in Cleveland, Horford was going crazy in the post in the second half. He was playing with a level of assertiveness that he never really plays with. And so everyone inside the league, all the guys, his teammates, coach, all that, they always say, Horford makes winning plays, he makes the right play. Horford always talks about sometimes the pass is the right play. And that's true, of course, but a part of being the star is that sometimes you have to just, when the system isn't really working, you have to assert yourself and you have to be physically dominant. And he's been doing that a lot more this year, and that's the one criticism I've always had. It's just that he is sometimes a little too passive, and sometimes you just kind of have to break the mold and maybe not make what's considered the right decision, but make what's a necessary decision. And I think he's done that more this year, and he's playing at a level that I don't know if he's actually ever played in his career. This could be the best that he's been playing in his whole career.
Yeah, I think it honestly probably is, and I thought there was very little chance that he would live up to the 4-year, $130 million contract he signed. I'll just be honest. I thought there was a low chance he could live up to that. I thought it was still a good signing for Boston because at that, once you get that much talent kind of centered in a singular asset, I think it's actually okay to overpay a little bit, as long as you can kind of find little ways to create value other places on your roster, as obviously the Celtics have been able to show themselves as capable of doing. But this year, he is full stop a $30 million a year player. You know what I mean? Like that is a contract that looks fine right now, especially with the way that he looks like he's going to continue to age properly and age well in the modern NBA with his quickness and with his just overall high IQ, high feel game. He's a really just awesome player. And I have a number that I want to share with you because it's just totally unbelievable to me that he is in spot up situations right now. He has a 69.5 effective field goal percentage, which is in the 94th percentile in the NBA. That's on 82 field goal attempts. So like not like a minuscule sample size. It's small, but it's not like, we're talking 30 shots here. He's been unreal in any situation you throw him in. You throw him in handoffs, you throw him in pick and roll, pick and pops. He's just so efficient. He's going to make the right decision just about every single time that you ask him to do it. It's just really, really impressive the way that he's been able to. I don't even think it's remaking his game. Just continue to add to his game and continue to add to his efficiency.
I mean, he was just about the best spot-up shooter in the league for a while there, along with Tatum, although his volume was higher. But he's also, his assist percentage is 25%, which is the 98th percentile among bigs. So he contributes more points than almost anyone else, any other big in the league does, even if his scoring average isn't as high. So, I mean, he's just... his assist to usage ratio is also 97th percentile, so he is making plays as much as he's using plays. There's a ton of hockey assists that he doesn't even get credit for. He is the system, and that was the big thing when looking at who they were last year. They needed Isaiah to execute the system, but Horford is the foundation of it, and Horford allows them to create plays out of every little action. He just, well, for one, he has like the veteran pass from the refs where almost every screen he sets is illegal. But at a certain point, just like KG, I've never seen KG set a legal screen in my life. They like take this wide stance and throw their elbows out, or Horford literally just throws his butt and starts twerking into the defender, and they almost never call it, except for ironically in the Miami game where he got fouled out with 3 quick fouls in like a minute span in the fourth quarter. But Horford has a free pass to commit offensive fouls, which allows him to be extremely effective. And I think I'd be really interested to see if there's like a study of I guess it would be anecdotal, but of which players are allowed to basically get away with moving screens and which players aren't. But because Horford can pretty much set any type of screen in DHO he wants, and to his credit, he's amazing at it, but he also just gets away with a lot of BS. But because of that, they can create a pick and roll situation out of almost from any angle. It doesn't really matter how many defenders they are, whether they have room on the sideline. I mean, they pull it off from everywhere, and Kyrie can step into a shot. Tatum is showing he can step into a shot. Jalen's inconsistent, but he can do it. And then Horford, he's the ultimate pick and pop guy because he's a 41% shooter from deep, and he is pretty hard to stop going to the rim. If a defender stops him high, he's able to scoop around them with a finger roll. He has a nice jump hook. I mean, they can't stop him anymore. And it's allowed the Celtics to basically, whenever something isn't working, they can just go to that two-man game, and they execute every time.
So I've basically, over the course of the last 4 weeks, I think I've talked about every Celtic in some sort of positive light. Like I've talked about Kyrie being unbelievable and his offensive game really starting to pick up. And I've talked about how I think I was wrong on Daniel Tice being like a bit of a sneaky not NBA player early in like the season in Boston. He looks really good now. And I've talked about Tatum and Brown ad nauseum. I've talked about Marcus Smart. Is there a player on this roster that you feel like is underperforming a little bit to expectation? Like, is there a guy that, maybe you expect a little bit more of that you think they could get more of going forward?
So, I mean, Ojale has been good, but there's a lot more room for growth with his offensive capability. His usage rate right now is a 0 percentile for forwards, so according to Cleaning the Glass. So, he can... he can get involved with the offense a little bit more than being. He actually offensively kind of reminds me of where Terry Rozier was a couple years ago. I think it was his rookie season when they put him in the playoffs, and Rozier literally would just stand at the top of the key, and when the ball got swung to him, would just pass it to the next guy when they were running their motion offense. So Ojale is pretty much at that stage right now, but defensively he's been pretty phenomenal. He actually knows the system well, is a pretty good weak side defender. All of that's been really good. He's starting to show that he can be a great defender at the rim, and he can be a tenacious rebounder. So that's getting better. Marcus Morris, I think, is the only player that hasn't really been good. He doesn't turn the ball over very much, but he takes a lot of lousy shots and misses them. We kind of went over that earlier. I think he's better off as being a six-man for them. But he's got a really high usage rate. He has the second highest usage rate on the team to Kyrie. But he's only played 16 games. Yeah, it's pretty. When he gets out there, it's like a lot of ISO stuff. He has this one go-to move where he gets a guy ISO'd on the elbow and goes into like a double through the legs, step back, or a pull-up, I guess, from 18 feet, and he misses it most of the time. And he likes it as a signature move, but it doesn't really work. So, but he's really skilled, and he can be really effective, I think, playing in lineups with like Tatum and Brown, where Kyrie and Horford are not on the floor. And that would be huge if they can rely on him to be an ISO scorer or just a good scorer in lineups where they want to rest both Horford and Irving for a couple minutes in games, especially in the playoffs. So assuming that he's still here at that point, we'll see what happens. But he could be useful, and he's really important for replacing what they lost with Hayward, with just having another. Really, he's the third guy on this team besides Irving and Horford that you can feel confident can handle the ball or just like be a focal point of a scoring play and get a shot off from everywhere. Because while Smart is a very good point guard, he hasn't been good shooting off the dribble. He's actually shooting, I think, over 40% on spot ups from three in the last month, if I'm not mistaken. So that's like that horrible start is starting to come up, but he still is really struggling off the dribble. And at this point, I'm a little skeptical that that's going to turn around. So we'll see. I haven't checked his body fat percentage since the beginning of the year when he was skinny Marcus. So we'll see if that's still in play. But his assist percentage is at 24%, which is 98th percentile among wings per cleaning the glass. So I mean, he still is a very effective point guard, but he gets in the lane and struggles to get a good shot off, and that's always going to be a major hurdle for him to being an effective player.
Well, you know what? I don't even know that it's a hurdle to him being an effective player, because he's effective right now. I mean, just the way that Boston operates with Marcus Smart on the floor is, he helps everything other than jump shooting. You know what I mean?
Let me recontextualize then. For someone who wants to get paid $20 million a year this offseason, that's a major hurdle.
Right.
There we go.
Right. Like, I think right now he's probably more of like a $12 to $15 million player. I don't think any team should put away $20 million and say, okay, Marcus Smart is going to take the leap as a jump shooter. But I think he can be an effective starter. I think he is basically an effective starting caliber player right now. Oh my God, I can't believe I sneezed. I think he is basically an effective player right now. The issue is, though, that it's hard for me to see how he becomes like a legitimate star level player without the jump shot. And I don't know that we can trust the jump shot ever coming along.
I mean, if he could just hit floaters in the paint and pull up from 15 feet and was still a bad shooter off the dribble from three, that would be fine. If it was just like a decent spot up shooter and mediocre deep shooter, as long as he can make plays happen inside the arc and he could be a threat, then that would be one thing. But teams sag off of him a lot of the time, even when he's triple penetrating.
Well, there's that, and there's the fact that he's been one of the worst finishers at the rim this year, too, in the NBA.
His whole career.
Yeah, but like he's particularly this year in the second percentile, according to Synergy right now, in finishing at the rim in half-court settings. So, like, he's really, really, really bad at the rim. And he runs into the same deal that you saw with Ricky Rubio in Minnesota, except with a lot more versatility defensively that allows him to play off the ball, and you can hide him in much easier circumstances than you could with Rubio.
Although I'll tell you, when Utah came to Boston and Rubio had like 22 points and almost had a triple-double, he looked like Jerry West out there. He was incredible. So which I love, because he is one of my favorite prospects to come into the league in like my lifetime, and I've been really disappointed that his career hasn't taken off. But seeing him that night brought me so much joy.
Overall with Boston, I'm sure that you're very positive. Do you think that they can keep this up, though? Like, do you think that they are a legitimate threat to, can they beat Cleveland in a 7-game series, I guess is where you start.
So, things haven't been going as well. They've been like a barely above 500 team since they snapped their winning streak, and their defensive rating is down to like 20th during that time period. And I think they actually finally fell out of first place in defensive rating after that loss to Miami. So, things aren't trending well. And we'll see what Marcus Morris coming back to health sometime at the end of December or beginning of January, how that affects things. That could have a pretty big impact on them. But their schedule has been, while the teams they've been playing haven't been that great, it's been really dense. They had like 5 games, 7 nights the week before. They have a bunch of back-to-backs. They're on a back-to-back as we're recording this. So, having their schedule open up more in January, I think will help them a lot. And I think there's been a lot of schedule losses. Like they got blown out by Chicago, which kickstarted Chicago's incredible run as Nikola Mirotic is turning to Chris Mullin all of a sudden. So I think getting away from those schedule losses is going to make a big difference for them. And so they should come back around to being a top of the Eastern Conference team once that happens. And Hayward's return is, I think I've posted about Hayward's potential return like 10 times in the last like 3 days. It's the noise and murmurs of the fact that he wants to come back this year if it's possible, and management and coaches saying, everything's possible, but we're not going to push it. It's setting the table for him coming back for the playoffs. And I buy all the narratives that they're putting out there of who knows. They haven't been putting out any narrative of he's definitely not going to play. They're basically just saying he's recovering from an ankle injury, and medicine is impossible to predict because it's medicine and biology. So we'll see what happens, but he's working hard to come back. But if he does come back, he doesn't have to be amazing for them to be able to make the finals. Based on how good their system has looked so far in the year, based on what Stevens has been able to accomplish, if Hayward can come back and just be like a good shooter and play hard defense and just be able to move pretty well, that could be enough for them to take on Cleveland if Cleveland, if Isaiah isn't playing at his best. And I think it's way more likely that Isaiah is playing at his best than Hayward comes back and is a useful rotation player. So I still expect Cleveland to make it, and obviously injuries can change everything, but I still expect Cleveland and Boston to be duking it out in the conference finals. But it should be probably more competitive this year than it was last year, which is, that the bar for that is like below the ground because it was the most uncompetitive series in NBA history last year.
Well, you know what, and this will be the last question I ask you about Boston before we move on, but do you think it's worthwhile for Boston to bring back Hayward just for a playoff run after he played 5 minutes in the regular season with a team that, at least right now, seems to have a lot of chemistry together, playing together? I know that they've been on a little bit of a colder run lately, but at the same time, I don't know that I would want to fuck with that, right?
I don't think there's any negative because it's Hayward. It's not like they're bringing DeMarcus Cousins in. This guy. Sure. This is a guy that just kind of fits. He's like Flubber. He just fits into wherever little crevice. He takes whatever shape he needs. He's not he's not a guy that needs to be a high usage ball in his hands kind of guy. He's the kind of guy that can fit whatever role you need him to in the offense, and they can utilize him however they want to. They can use him as an off-ball shooter, as a spot-up guy on the weak side. They can get him involved with DHO actions to give him, to get him attacking the lane with momentum. He doesn't have to be fed his touches. So I don't think he's the kind of player that I don't think there's any downside to trying to do it. But for me, I've been preaching the entire time. Don't bring him back until you can hit him with a baseball bat over the ankle and he doesn't feel it. Like, he has to be 155%. And he said in an interview earlier this week, I think with Dan Patrick, that for him, he thinks he'll be ready, when he can go run the play, that alley-oop play that he said he ran 70 times with Utah last season. Once he can go run that play and not even think, not second guess it, not hesitate a little bit, that's when he'll know he'll be ready. So he wants to get to physically 100% and then take a while to get to mentally 100%. But he's not going back out there until he has no hesitation and no qualms whatsoever. And I would be really surprised if that's this year. I know that from like a recovery standpoint, he could technically be ready as soon as April or maybe even March or something like that. But from a mental standpoint, with a guy that if he becomes chronically injured, their chances of building a dynasty, I think, are over. They can't do it with his contract if he is perennially injured and is a dead money on their books. So they need to be as cautious as possible because he's making way too much money for them to be able to get out from under it. They need him to be an elite player because they've gotten so far and they've been so careful and they've been so meticulous to build this potential dynasty, and they have to continue to be patient because, frankly, I don't think him being good this year makes any difference for them trying to beat the Warriors or the Rockets. I think both of those teams are definitely better. So him coming back early probably doesn't win them the title, and it's just not worth the risk.
Let's move on and talk Rockets Thunder. You mentioned earlier in the show that you believe that this is the most intriguing game for you, just from a narrative and storyline perspective on Christmas Day. Kind of delve into that a little bit more. What makes you believe that this is this might be the most important game of Christmas Day, maybe? Like Cavs Warriors matters in that anytime those two teams play, it matters. But from the way these two teams are playing right now, I think I agree with you that this is a very, very important matchup.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the way that we define OKC season hangs in the balance on this one. So this is the game where I think we're making a conclusive statement based off of how this one goes, because this is there's just so much pressure building up on OKC at this point that if this one doesn't go well on this stage, it could really be detrimental to them, really turning it around. And then the whole, do they need to get rid of Paul George because he's not going to stay because they're not good, things start to really take momentum. So this can really change the national narrative on them. And they're going up against a Houston team where they could, do the thing the Thunder have done in the past, which is playing to their strengths as opposed to playing to the opponent's strengths and try to beat them at their own game or beat them with their Thunder game as opposed to trying to play against the opponent and fitting into their style. So they're two contrasting teams, and if Oklahoma can win this one out, I think it's a major vote of confidence for what they've been trying to build. I'm not a fan of Russell Westbrook's style of play, and I've always felt that you're probably not going to be able to really, really win with Russell Westbrook being your number one guy because he's too reckless and too inefficient in crunch time, and he makes too many bad plays and takes too many bad shots. So I'd love to be disproved by that, but I felt that way last year. That's why I thought Harden should have been MVP, and I think that's continued to prove true, but hopefully he's starting to turn it around there. But, I mean, Houston, it's also a defining moment for Houston where they can really confirm that they are a very legitimate title contender, which I think they are. And the gap, I mean, have they lost with Chris Paul and Harden together yet? I don't think they have, right? So
I don't think they have either.
Yeah, so, I mean, that's insane. That's like absolutely amazing. And this is a big coming out party for them to remind all the casual fans and all the national storyline writers that the Rockets are probably the best team in the NBA right now, and they're also healthy, unlike Golden State. So that's what makes it so exciting for me, is this can really define two franchises' storylines for the whole season in this one game.
Well, here is kind of where I'm at with Oklahoma City. What do you think their identity is? Like, what do you think Thunder basketball is right now? Because I think that's realistically what they're struggling with the most. Like, I don't think that they really have a handle on the best way for them to go out and win games. Like, sometimes they go out and they play a little bit smaller and a little bit more athletic. A lot of times it's just kind of rust ball. At least lately it's just been Russell Westbrook is going to go out. He's going to go out and drop 30 points and not pass the ball as much as a point guard typically does and just do his thing. And then other times they try and get Carmelo significantly involved. And it just doesn't seem like to me they have a coherent kind of mentality about the way they approach and attack games at this stage.
So, I mean, for me, their identity has, and Cantor leaving kind of affects this, but their identity has always been a duality of the one-man show in Westbrook, and then a bunch of really good physical hustling players like Adams and Roberson and Grant and so forth. And so I think they're still struggling with that duality, and they're trying to fit George and Anthony into that, who are guys that want to have a huge share of the pie. And I think Russell was kind of almost passive trying to share that with them, although he's still number one in usage at 38%, so his usage is still pretty insane. But they're still struggling to figure that out, but I think with George is starting to figure it out, and he's been playing amazing defense, and he's been a big reason why they're an elite defensive team and they're number one in the league now. So credit them for that. Is at least they've been holding it up on the defensive end, and that's allowed them to still be a decent team. But their offensive system has just always kind of been broken with Westbrook out there, and I think Scott Brooks has kind of proven in Washington that the whole thing with their ISO system was more. I think you could put that more on Westbrook than you can on the coaches there, because Donovan's having the same issues, and their offense, I think, looks at least a little more cohesive when Westbrook's not on the floor. So they probably are never going to find that singular identity, but if they can figure out a balance between the two, where just Westbrook can just not pull up from 15 feet every single time he's driving towards the hoop, or just like throw off wild shots, just like play grounded a little bit more and use that explosiveness when you need to instead of doing it every single time. I think last year he had the mentality of I have to do everything, and this year he's trying to figure out how to go back to not having that mentality, and they're still struggling with that. Yeah. But it's as much as just Melo's got to realize that he either needs to be committed to every single play or he needs to move to the bench. And Melo's ego has been too much of an issue. And for everyone that has been coming out of New York saying, Melo wasn't the problem and why do we keep shitting on Melo? Melo was a huge part of the problem in New York, because Melo's style of play and his decision making was the reason why they were so limited, why their ceiling was so low. Especially in the playoffs. He was a terrible decision maker on offense. He always has been, but he's one of the most talented players to ever come into the league, so he makes up for it. But he hasn't shown, to me at least so far, much growth on that in Oklahoma, and he's got to go to the bench then and be a sixth man if he wants to play that way, and he doesn't seem to want to do that, and he seems to laugh at that idea off, but the coach has to make that call because they're on a one-year trial with this team, and they're running out of time to prove that they can keep it all together, and of course sell Paul George on staying, which they need him to stay, otherwise they're completely screwed.
Question: has Steven Adams been the second best player on the Thunder this year, even better than Paul George?
That's a really good question. I mean, he's definitely the third at least, right? So
right.
I don't think so. No, I think George
it's still probably George. I agree with you, but I think it's at the point where Steven Adams needs to be discussed in that way. You know what I mean?
I mean, I don't want to be too biased because I'm a huge Adams stan. I love everything about the guy. One of the best interviews in the game. I think his offensive game has become well-rounded enough to the point that he's so good on defense. He's so good in all the hustle areas. He's like who Boston wishes Marcus Smart was, basically. Yeah, if
Marcus Smart was 7 feet tall, he would be Steven Adams.
Exactly. But he's so good. I think George has been good enough that I wouldn't take it to that level. George hasn't been very efficient, but when I watch them, I see Westbrook as the crux of the issue, and I think everyone is trying to make it work around him. And Russ, and like I said before, Russ, who's credit, I think, tried to take a bit of a backseat early on, but taking a backseat doesn't necessarily equate with making things work cohesively. Those are two different things. So, no, I think George is still that number two guy for them, but Adams has been everything they could hope he would be. And, because of the way he looks, it's hard to remember. He's only 24 years old.
Oh, I know. It's crazy.
He still has so much to add to his offensive game. He has so much time to become a better shooter and be better moving with the ball. And, there's not much he can do to improve as a defender. He's one of the best defensive players in the game. But, that's one of the things for this team with its ceiling is Adams should be getting better and better and better and becoming more of a complete player to the point that he's an all-NBA player. And he could be there already.
Yeah, I don't think he's like a top 5 center in the league. I do think he's a top 10 center in the league. I'm pretty confident saying that, just due to the defense, due to the way that he's efficient scoring the basketball around the rim. His passing ability gets significantly underrated. You look at his assist numbers, he only averages 1 assist a game. A lot of his stuff comes with little hockey assists where he, on a short roll catches the ball and dishes it out to a wing, and then it gets reversed around and they get an open shot that way. He's been really, really just incredibly good this year, and I think deserves a lot of credit for that. I'm trying to think if there's anything else really worth mentioning about Oklahoma City. I guess that another question here is, if you're Sam Presti and you're the Thunder, and this thing kind of goes south around March, and you have to figure out, okay, I'm still sitting at 500. It's clear this team does not work. I have to trade Paul George. Forget what you get exactly for Paul George. How do you even build around Russell Westbrook? What is, for you, the most coherent piece in the NBA that would fit next to Russ and Steven Adams as centerpieces?
Well, I would say first off, unless I get an offer that I think is literally a good offer, I would not trade Paul George. I think they have a better chance of retaining him than getting value out of a second round pick and a mediocre rotation player or something like that. Because I assume if they do try to trade him, they're getting shit. No one's going to offer them anything. So I would probably keep Paul George. And then as far as building around Russell Westbrook, I think you got to target guys that are non-ball handling shooters, I guess, for the most part. So you're trying to get a hold of guys like Chris Middleton. You're hoping somehow you could get a hold of Klay Thompson or something like that. But I guess you gotta get guys that pretty much don't really ever need the ball in their hands and just are there to space the floor. Hey, maybe Kevin Love becomes available or something like that. So I think that's who they should be. And actually, I should say Paul George for Kevin Love. That would be the one trade I would really try to pull off, but that didn't come to fruition, or it came really close to the finishing line for that one back in the spring. We'll see if that's still possible. But I would target guys that are just shooters that don't need the ball in their hands, so that you can run the offense that Russ wants to, and they're just kind of standing there waiting for the ball to pop out to them.
Yeah, I think you're right there. I talked about the Rockets pretty extensively on my last podcast. Do you have anything that you want to say particularly about this Houston team that has been as impressive as any other in the NBA so far this season?
I guess the only thing I would just want to, we know how great Chris and James are. I guess just that Capella's been amazing, and I'm actually really surprised how effective he's been. He's taken a huge leap this year. Probably could win Most Improved Player if it weren't for what the storyline behind Oladipo. But he's so great, and credit to Morey and their player development staff that they've been able to add a potential franchise cornerstone at a low cost in the way that they did with him, and just be able to develop him from being what looked like I thought would be a good rotation piece to an untouchable foundational piece that complements everything else that they're trying to do. That's been a phenomenal example of how successful teams can use their first round picks, even if they're not in the lottery, to be able to mine some great talent and develop it. Yeah. It's like Draymond all over again, although he's not at that level, but it's the same philosophy.
Right, exactly. These late first round picks aren't worth nothing. They're often traded like they're worth nothing, and I think that at the end of the day, the expected value of such a pick is probably not incredibly high, but the equity that you can gain out of a player making $1.5 to $2 million hitting is genuinely one of the most valuable things that you can find in the NBA. If you can get a guy who by season 3 is a legitimate starter, you look at Kelly Oubre in Washington, you look at Clint Capella now in Houston, and honestly, those two aren't even like equal players. Capella is much more valuable, but at the same token, it is just so incredibly valuable for a team to be able to find these style of players who can be such bargains that it allows you to be so much more flexible in the way you go out and build the rest of your roster. It allows for so many more errors in building the team, and every general manager is going to make errors building a team. It's just natural. It's going to happen. This is a venture capital industry, not an exact science. It's just that finding those kinds of players is just so incredibly useful to the way that you go about, finding pieces to build an organization.
Yeah, I mean, like the mid-20s is like my favorite part of the draft. It's just, there's just so much. There's like, those are the ones where you see those picks and you're like, oh wow, if that guy really hits for that team, they could be amazing if that really comes to fruition. And the 26th pick the year before that was Andre Roberson, and that's worked out. The 27th pick was Rudy Gobert. Gobert was someone I was obsessed with in the draft, and I was amazed that he fell that much. I didn't think he would be this good, obviously, but it's watching those guys that fall that because they're considered to be too raw or they're too limited, and seeing them really expand their game on a team with a good player development staff that's already competitive. That's like my favorite thing that can happen with the draft.
Let's go on ahead and move on to the last game of the season, or of the Christmas Day season. Good Lord. It's been a long day already, Jared.
It's been a long podcast.
Yeah. So the Minnesota Timberwolves and the Los Angeles Lakers. The Lakers hit on one of those mid-20s picks in Kyle Kuzma last season. The Timberwolves have been one of the more interesting teams around the league, I would say. Just because, they're winning more games. There's no doubt there. At the same token, though, there's something off here. There's very clearly just something that is wrong with the way that they're winning games and the way they're going about achieving their results. What have been your impressions of Minnesota so far?
Well, it's weird, but it feels like Tibbs has been left behind in a different era. They're
100% agree.
Yeah, these guys are all playing insane minutes, and we know that Chicago's front office tried to fight it, and that was why things fell apart there, and they were right. And I wonder how Derrick Rose's career would have changed if the minutes were different there. But they, Jimmy Butler is playing an insane amount of minutes. He's 28, and he shouldn't be doing that. I mean, they gotta balance this stuff. He's playing 37 minutes per game, and they've got like Shabazz Muhammad never gets used, and while he's not that good, he at least can spell some minutes for Jimmy Butler, and they seem to be super resistant to that.
Shabazz Muhammad has only played 250 minutes this year is incredible to me.
Yeah,
like that makes no sense whenever you're playing Jimmy Butler 40 minutes and Andrew Wiggins 40 minutes a night.
I mean, maybe they're just trying to destroy his value so they can keep him for like a minimum contract or something like that. I don't know. But I mean, Tibbs is he's never gone with a deep enough rotation, and he doesn't stagger well enough with his lineups, and that hurts them so much. And so,
you know what the issue is though? What? Whenever you're playing your guys 40 minutes a night, there's nothing to stagger. That's true.
But it's like they don't stagger, and then they feel like they have to keep Butler out there the entire time. But if they would mix and match the lineups better, they wouldn't have that issue. But also, I mean, Towns' defense has just been really lousy, and I don't watch them enough to know exactly why it is over like a larger sample size. But he's had all the personnel he could possibly want around him between Tibbs and KG. It's like he's gotten all the coaching that he needs to be a good defensive player, and I don't know what it is that's not allowing him to be successful. But he's a major negative on defense right now. That hurts them.
I agree with you that he's definitely a major negative on defense. I think that it's worth pointing out, though, that he's not alone in that. Like, you watch the way that this team defends, and it's a communication issue. It's a communication breakdown from the mesh point of the screen to the backside help defense to the way that Towns hedges out and then has to recover. It's not even just him. I think that he gets the brunt of it because he's not good right now, and the center is often the captain of the defense that is supposed to be communicating everything that happens on the floor to the rest of his teammates. But to me, it's not just him. It's a team that has played 30 games together that still hasn't quite meshed well enough, in terms of the way that they operate on defense.
Yeah, and they're 26 in defensive rating now, so they they do force turnovers because of the personnel they have out there, but they make a lot of there's a lot of teams, there's some teams I guess that are still hedging high, and I guess that works sometimes against certain personnel, but there's a reason why the whole league is either icing or switching, and that's because guards get into their shot so quickly nowadays, and everybody on the floor is usually a shooter. So if you're hedging high, you're allowing for a driving kick way more easily, and that's causing defensive mismatches, which is causing the churning that leaves somebody wide open on the weak side. And
you have to be so athletic at the front court positions to hedge high. Like, you have to be like, Karl Towns is an athletic big man, but like his foot speed is probably pretty average for centers, right? Like,
I think it sucks.
You think it sucks?
On defense, at least. I think it sucks, yeah.
Right. Well, I think it's more reaction time there than anything. But
maybe.
In terms of just pure athleticism, I think his speed is probably average. I think he does have a pretty quick first step, and he's very, very fluid. But like, just in terms of sliding 3 times in a row and then having to recover, his speed is probably pretty average. You have to be like Tristan Thompson level quick defensively. You have to be just among Jordan Bell level defensively to be able to high hedge and blitz pick and rolls and be able to recover as quickly as you need to in the NBA. You just can't do it with someone that has average speed.
I can't believe you just referred to a second-round rookie who was bought by another team as the standard for pick-and-roll speed for hedging.
Well,
it's
for
amazing.
Speed, yeah.
It's just amazing how good Bell is.
No, I know, but like, that was a fuck-up on the entire NBA's part. I had Jordan Bell at 21 on my draft board last year. He's unbelievable. Like, I don't understand what people didn't see in his defense.
Maybe you should be running the Chicago Bulls front office.
I would accept that offer, Chicago, for what it's worth. Having said that, though, it's just, I agree with you. I think Tibbs' defensive scheme and the way that he is trying to, run these Timberwolves, these little, 22-year-old Timberwolves, is just setting them up for failure in a significant way.
Is there a chance that Tibbs gets fired?
No, because he's running the team. He'd have to fire himself. Do you think
he's such a hard ass? I wouldn't put it past him to fire himself.
But then you look at the way that he's gone about building the team, and do you want him running the player upside? Like, is that something that's useful?
No, I definitely would not want him doing that. Player development, maybe, but definitely not scouting.
It was just a bizarre hire to me in general. Like, I got it from a coaching perspective, but to attach yourself so strongly to him, if this wasn't going to work, especially such an abrasive personality, that was a very weird decision, I think, from Minnesota.
Yeah, the league seems to be or at least players around the league seem to be embracing these, coaches that aren't abrasive, aren't old school, are very egalitarian, that are trying to empower their players, like, Kurz and Stevens and, other coaches like that. So it's not to say that you have to hire a coach like that, but that seems to be the model of success lately.
Yeah, I agree with you. Overall, with Minnesota, I think we have to be more positive than negative last year, even though we just kind of shit on them for 10 minutes. But, it's still a situation that doesn't seem 100% right, even as they're on track for 48 wins right now.
Yeah, it's like they have a good record, but that minutes thing and just some of the other defensive issues, those are the red flags that indicate a drop-off after the trade deadline.
Yeah, and I mean, you can look at their net rating as well. Their net rating is 1.4.
Yeah.
That's more of like a 43-win team, 44-win team than the pace they're on right now. So I think they're going to see a little bit of a drop unless we start to see more from them in terms of the way that they defend and the way that they figure out how to play together. Because even Taj Gibson, there's been a drop-off defensively this year. It's not just the young kids.
Well, Taj Gibson's 32, and he's been playing for Tibbs, which means his body's 45, so it could just be that. Yeah, no,
I mean, you look at when Jimmy Butler and Taj Gibson are on the court, they are much better defensively. They're 2.5, 3 points better defensively per 100 possessions. But Yeah, it's just not good enough when they're on the floor. They still have a 105 defensive rating when those guys are on the floor. So let's move on to the Lakers. The Lakers have at least been interesting so far. Like, they're not good, but they're at least fun to watch. Like, Kyle Kuzma's been really fun. Lonzo Ball has been a fascinating story to track, and he's starting to turn it around and be very, very good. Brandon Ingram's been very, very good over the last month. What excites you most about this Lakers team beyond nothing, given the fact that you grew up in Boston and are a Boston fan?
Yeah, I'm not a fan anymore, right? So, like, I don't care about that necessarily, but I'll always be intrigued more by LA than just about any other team. And they just always have this aura about them. There's always something about them, and this team is really interesting to watch. I think they're aesthetically really exciting to watch, and they're one of these young teams that's athletic, and they run, and they play at a high pace and stuff like that, and it's really fun, but then they just make some ridiculous turnovers, and they fall on their face all the time. It's kind of like, watching like a baby penguin try to learn how to go fishing, and it's sometimes a baby penguin goes out there and it drowns and it doesn't work out, but most of the time they're making progress, and I think that's how it's been with I was watching National Geographic the other day, so it's on my mind, but that's how it's been watching this team play so far. And I really like their roster now. Josh Hart is getting more opportunity, who hopefully will eventually be a useful rotation player, and Larry Nance, I still think he's going to be a good center, which I don't know if that's controversial or not. I don't think so, but the big dunks are awesome, but I'm excited for his potential as a defensive center. And Randall has taken another small step towards being a good player, and we'll see what happens this offseason. I'm very interested to see where he'll end up. But Kuzma, I think for me, is the big story with them. Is Kuzma, I think, has gone from being an older rookie who looks like he has some nice skills, and teams will eventually figure him out, to he just dropped 38, I think, the other night, and looks like a complete scorer. And he's got that awesome floater, which means he can basically shoot at any time from anywhere. And he is becoming one of the most exciting young players in the league. So the fact that Ingram and Ball are both extremely exciting, but for me, Kuzma's the guy I really want to watch every single night. The fact that they have several players that are kind of must-watch players, that's a pretty huge thing for this team.
Yeah, it really is, especially whenever you're talking about an organization that's going to have at least 2 max cap spots this summer. Having a fun team that is growing and developing together with these young pieces, proving themselves as at least competent, coherent building blocks, is essential to the way that they're going to be able to go out and sell themselves in free agency. You mentioned Julius Randle. He's been awesome this year. 6'9" center that's apparently or basically just playing undersized as a center, and that's the way that so many teams are going now. They're switching everything, and instead of trying to solely just protect the rim, they're actually also trying to go about just reducing penetration. And I think that that's what Randall does when he's on the floor defensively, that at least makes him useful. Jordan Clarkson this year's another guy. Like, Jordan Clarkson is still like 25 years old. And he's been very useful this year as an off-the-bench scorer. Like, I think he's a guy that a lot of teams around the NBA, even though he has the $12 million a year contract, should probably look at as a potential trade chip, because he's not a negative. I don't think that contract is underwater like I did last year. It's actually a useful deal going forward. Then go ahead.
Well, just with the growth of the cap, I think his contract is pretty much commensurate with a good 6-man, right? So yeah. He's fairly valued, and he's proven to be basically like the second coming of Monte Ellis. Maybe not quite as good, but he's in his exact role, and I mean, he should. I hope they are able to keep him and can utilize him in this role, because I think he's been really great, and he's put in a lot of sweat equity for going through all the stuff that they've gone through over the years. And I would feel bad if right when they're starting to get very good that he didn't get to be a part of that.
Yeah, no, I think that I 100% agree with you there. And then you look at what Brandon Ingram's been able to do over the course of the last, I would say month or so. He's been really, really good over that time. He's now, averaging on the season like 16 and 6 and 3 assists. And you look at the efficiency numbers, they still aren't quite there yet, just because he started the season so poorly. But over the last month, it's been there. Like, he is actually starting to assert himself and become the piece that he was at Duke his freshman season, where even though he didn't quite have that, strength that was necessary, he had enough to where he could at least battle and fight and create his own position and establish his own position in a marginal way that allows him to get where he needs to be on the floor.
And he's shown capability and comfort as a pick and roll ball handler now, and that'll come more and more over time. And he somehow looks more and more disturbingly long as he ages. And he's only 20. He's the same age as Lonzo, right? So he's still extremely young. But some of the games that I've watched of them recently, he looks a lot more comfortable being the playmaking scorer in crunch time, and that he's able to take that on this early into his career and not completely fall on his face and trip over his shoelaces, I think is a very good sign for them. And he's had so much pressure put on him at such an extremely young age. Compare like him and Jason Tatum, and everyone's going crazy over Jason Tatum's potential, but Tatum does not have the responsibility, and he's in a much better system where it enables him to play make, while Ingram is having to fight to really make these plays effective a lot of the time, and he's done a really commendable job, and he's growing within the season, and we're seeing him getting more comfortable with his role. Lonzo is also figuring it out, which is really helpful, but I think him and Lonzo are going to complement each other so well within a couple of years, and that's when their offense is going to be really, really hard to stop, regardless of who else they have with them.
Yeah, over his last 10 games, Brandon Ingram is averaging 19 points, 6 rebounds on 44% shooting. That's good enough. Just full stop, that's good enough for a kid that's 20 years old and younger than what I believe quite a few rookies that were freshmen last year in this class. So he's a very, very good basketball player. I'm excited to see where it goes from here for him. Let's finish on Lonzo Ball, just because I feel like every podcast has to have some sort of discussion about Lonzo Ball. Been much better over the course of the last, I would say, 10 games or so. The shooting has started to come around a little bit. And now that that's coming around, it seems like the rest of his game is really starting to open up now that he's, I would say just a little bit more confident as a shooter. And, the mechanics seem to have simplified a little bit. He's obviously still bringing the ball up from the left side. I don't think that's ever going to change, really. But, he's not flying as far forward whenever he shoots. He's been a little bit more balanced in his jump shot, and I think that's important. It seems like he's not pressing as much now.
Yeah, his rhythm looks better, which I thought was the biggest issue, was he looked really rushed, and his legs seemed to be ahead of his arms, and that was kind of a mess. So that's a little bit better. He never appeared to be panicking, and he always looked composed, but I think when he was shooting, he felt a little bit panicked. So he also, I think, has gotten comfortable where he doesn't shoot because he thinks he has to shoot, and he's starting to just kind of play his game at his own speed rather than trying to feel like he has to keep up with the frenetic pace. So he has more control over the game now. I mean, his points per shot attempt is still at 83.4, which is 4th percentile among point guards. So that is still atrocious. He's still basically the worst. He's still the worst shooter at his position right now, but it's coming around. And I saw him. There was one clip that was circulating on Twitter where he pulled up and transitioned from 15 feet and looked completely smooth, and that was a celebration, which shows that the bar is so unbelievably low right now. But he has, to his credit, he has made up for it in every other way that he can, and he's trying hard on defense. He's trying to learn how to be he's already a good playmaker on defense and on offense as well, but he's learning how to be consistent, learning how to read and stuff like that, which is great. He's been good in transition. His basketball IQ is going to take him places, and even if his shot continues to be inconsistent throughout his career, I still think he's going to be an all-star caliber player, or at least near that. He could end up being kind of like what Rondo was right before he hit his peak in 2011, I guess. And that's still a near all-star player. If he can be a better shooter and become more physically tough, that's when he starts to really make that leap to getting to all-star and maybe even all-NBA.
Yeah, no, I think that I'm with you there. I was someone who was just slightly lower than consensus on him coming into the NBA draft. I will say, though, that over his last 5 games, and small sample size, of course, 44% from the field, 39% from three. Still can't shoot free throws, and that's going to be a significant issue he needs to figure out going forward. But, he just contributes in every single category in the box score, and he contributes to the way a team plays, I think. That can't really be overstated. Like, I see some snarky jokes from time to time, like, yeah, he's definitely contributing to this team losing. But, like, I actually look at what he's doing and think that he's a big reason why this team plays the attractive style that it does. Like, he's a big reason why this team is unselfish and doesn't always try and, make the superstar play. Like, I think that they're actually an aesthetically pleasing team in large part because of Lonzo.
Yeah, I mean, he, from a characteristic standpoint, has all the traits you want out of a point guard. That's what I love about his potential is, and we don't need to get into the whole thing about, like, with his dad and all this stuff. Like, his personality, temperament is that of a calm, composed point guard who really is a true pass-first point guard in his philosophical approach and the way that he reads the floor and the way that he just conducts himself both on and off the floor. So I think he checks off all the boxes there. It's mostly about just dealing with the physicality and the speed, and then, of course, just his shot being consistent. I think for him, the issue with his shot or I guess the consequence of his shot is less about teams sagging off of him as much as him getting discouraged and being frustrated, and it just enabling him to continue to be confident. Because teams sagging off of him, he's so effective getting near the rim, and then he's so athletic and can finish with both hands so well that he could still be an effective player even if teams are giving him space. So I don't think that's going to matter nearly as much as just him being confident and him being committed to being aggressive on every single play and not getting discouraged. That's what I would worry about more than anything.
Yeah, I mean, I will say I'm a little bit more worried about the finishing around the rim. He's in the 16th percentile in finishing in the half court right now, shooting just 46% at the rim. But mostly I think that's just an issue of a lack of explosion. As he continues to fill out his body and matures his frame, I think that'll be a big help. Like, he'll get bigger and stronger and faster as he turns 21 and 22 and 25, and I think that'll be a pretty significant help. Before I let you go, Jared, I'm going to make you pick all of these Christmas games here, no more than just a quick sentence as to why. 76ers versus Knicks. Go ahead.
Knicks.
Cavs versus Warriors.
Cavaliers. Cavs. I'll pick Cavs on that one.
I like it.
LeBron tour de force, no Curry. Thompson's getting healthy. If Isaiah is out there, oh my God, that'd be insane. But I'm assuming he's not. So I'll still pick Cavaliers.
Wizards-Celtics.
That's a tough one. I'd still go with Boston. Yeah, I would still go with Boston. Hopefully the Morris brothers break each other's faces. That'll be fun to watch. But I'll pick Boston for that one.
Rockets. Go ahead.
I just say that one hopefully will be like 199 as a final score.
Rockets Thunder.
Rockets. I don't see the Thunder pulling this one off. I think the Rockets will kick their asses.
Timberwolves Lakers.
Let's go for the Laker upset on this one. I think Kyle Kuzma is going to have 35 points.
I don't know if he's going to have 35, but I think I agree with you that he has a big night, and I think that the Lakers win that game with you as well. I would go 76ers. I would take the Warriors. I would take Boston, and I would take Houston in addition to that. Last thing I'm going to ask you here, order these games in terms of excitement.
All right, let's see. So, excitement, I guess Rockets Thunder because of the reasons I said, but from a national perspective, obviously Cavs and Warriors, nothing touches that. For me, number 2, Joel Embiid versus Kristaps Porzingis. If that happens, that makes that number 2 for me. And then number 3 would be Cavs Warriors because it's such an amazing matchup. Then Wizards-Celtics, I guess probably number 4 because of the Morris brothers hopefully facing off, which would be exciting. And there's just always so much bad blood between those two teams, and hopefully Kyrie versus John Wall, and then Lakers, Wolves. Yeah, that'll be a fun one. But you know what? I'm on the East Coast and I'm tired by 10:30, so so that's as simple as that.
Oh man, I would probably go myself. I would say Cavs Warriors. I would say Rockets Thunder next. I would say 76ers Knicks like Jared did third. Wizards Celtics fourth, and then Lakers Wolves 5. I'm also going to be a little bit tired, I think, by the time 7:30 out here rolls around my time. So I'll probably watch most of that game, but won't be super into it. Jared, tell the people where they can find your work.
Yeah, you can find me at CelticsWire on USA Today. That is the site that I am running and posting a ton of content every single day. Currently working on a couple features, which should be out over the next few weeks. And find me on Twitter, Jared Weiss, NBA.
Jared is one of my favorite people on the internet to follow for NBA coverage. He's fun, great rapport here, as you can tell by the hour 45-minute podcast, however the hell long this ended up being.
That's it?
Yeah, who the hell knows? This has been the Game Theory Podcast. Please remember to rate, review, and subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, Android, any place where you get podcasts. We're up there now. Everyone have a Merry Christmas. This will be the last podcast before Christmas ends up coming. We're going to release this on Christmas Eve, as you guys have already listened to. So thank you all for listening. I really appreciate it over the course of the last year. And please go subscribe to The Athletic, so keep me employed over there. But until next time, we'll talk soon. Bye.